What's up, everybody? This is Stephen Hogan. Welcome back to the Stephen Hogan Podcast. And before we get into it, make sure to like, share, subscribe, leave a rating. If you do leave a rating, hopefully it's 5 stars. We're going to jump into it here. Here's a little bit about LeAnn Phelan. She was formerly co-head of ASCAP Nashville Creative, where her passion was creating opportunities for Nashville's diverse creative community, including the GPS project, which is still going strong today, which we talk about in this episode. Phelan was Senior Director of A&R at Sony Nashville and VP at Combustion Music. She started in music publishing at Windswept in 1996. LeAnn's previously provided A&R services for Miranda, Lambert, Ashley Monroe, Jesse Alexander, and the band Perry, as well as talent scouting for American Idol and America's Got Talent. LeAnn has received the following honors: Music City Milestone from her alma mater, Belmont University, Billboard's Most Powerful Women in Music, and Women in Music City. LeAnn, thanks for being here. Welcome to episode 20 of the Stephen Hogan Podcast.
The magical number 20.
Yes, the number 20, which is the number in which 99% of podcasts end at. And here we are, sitting strong.
There's no way this one's ending at 20.
No. No way.
I want to come back for your 100th.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do that.
Will you book me for your 100th?
Yeah, you got it. I already have my goal's 1,000. That's my big goal right now.
That's awesome.
I got to get to 500, but 100 first. That's going to be the next big milestone.
You're going to do it.
Well, we're going to get into it today. We talk about all kinds of cool things, so here we go.
I moved to Nashville, and I had one friend that was going to Belmont, and that's kind of a wild story too. So she was from my hometown. Her name's Gina, and she let me stay with her and look at the school and stuff. And she got married, or got engaged, and she asked me to sing at her wedding. And you know, I have done a lot of weddings before, but this particular wedding, she was getting married to Steve Winwood, and the wedding was in New York, and I was 19 years old, and I had never been on a plane, never been to New York, and certainly never had sung with a harpist and a flautist from the Metropolitan Opera. And so the Presbyterian preacher from my hometown, Walter Lockhart, and myself, we flew to New York, and you know, we participated in the wedding. And so that's how I met Steve Winwood, through Gina. And then 2 years after that, I ended up on a world tour with him, traveling to Japan and London and playing Royal Albert Hall and filming a Showtime special and all this stuff, like holding down, you know, the Shaka Khan parts on Higher Love.
Crazy.
So it was crazy. I mean,
so were you enrolled yet at Belmont at that point?
I was.
Okay,
yeah.
So did you like say, "Hey, I got a tour I'm bouncing out to go be with Steve Winwood"?
They worked with me on that, and like, I remember I wrote a paper about the experience for like the internship credit. It wasn't an internship, but they let me, you know, do that. And then I do remember having books with me on the plane to Japan, you know, so they really, you know, that's what we were going to school for, you know what I mean? So yeah, they were really awesome. And it was Belmont College at that time too. I mean,
oh, interesting.
Now it's such a, you know, different experience for kids.
So then fast forwarding to some of the, so you got, for people listening, LeAnn, you were a huge and have just been a huge part of the music industry. So you moved here, and going from moving to Nashville to being on tour, but then you fast forward a little bit. Let's talk about like your time at ASCAP in 2014. They named you as one of the female music industry. I forget what the exact words were, but
the Billboard Women in Music or something like that. Yeah, that was
like there was a bunch of stuff like that I read about you, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you were in such a position of influence in the music business. How did that come to be?
Well, I think it's important to say that, and I say this in my classes a lot, like passion evolved for me. You know, your passion can evolve. And we hear that a lot, like your purpose evolves or whatever. I think for me, it was my passion. 'Cause I loved being a singer. Like I didn't see I didn't want to do anything else when I was 21. But the lifestyle and the uncertainty and things like that caught up with me. And I think, I've learned during COVID that I really am an introvert that can do extroverted things. And I really do get plenished having that alone time and routine and all of that. And
so you're an introvert by nature,
yes,
but you can do extrovert things.
Yeah.
So your natural self would be to be at home, coffee, book.
Oh yeah, writing, journaling, learning,
introspective.
Yeah,
okay.
Something creative. Like sometimes I just have to paint or something. I'm in my head a lot these days.
I'm like that too.
Yeah, I really like it. I feel like I'm just growing when I do that.
Yeah.
And
learning more and like self-education and that's kind of what you're saying a little bit.
Yes. And do you find that you have to have really understanding people that are your friends when you're like that? Because, it seems like, oh, what's she doing over there? Like, why can't she come do this? But it's that creative energy that, is probably pouring into your podcast. It's pouring into classes that I'm trying to come up with or different angles to help creatives.
So you go from the introverted extrovert, you discover this about yourself, but you have the extrovert part that you can do, which is required in the music business. So what did that look like for you?
That looks like...
And how is that the machine in which evolved you to be able to get into the positions of like where you were at ASCAP and things like that?
Well, okay, how that happened, and the reason I was talking about your passion evolving is that, and it actually, when I really look at it, it came from a rejection of a tour. I was auditioning for, remember when Winona made her solo record, and it was so great, and it was a little more poppy because I came from pop music. So I was down to the last two people to fill one of her background singer spots. And we came in the next day to sing with the band and all that. And I didn't get that job. And it crushed me. And a couple of days later, like the new background singer was like right behind Winona on the David Letterman show, and I was just like, oh, didn't. And so that was kind of, I think, my push into maybe you need to look at something else. And I'm not saying that everyone that's a creative who's having one of those moments right now needs to change courses, because that's not necessarily true, but it was true for me. And so I got a job at a studio, And I loved it. I knew a lot of the people that were coming in and out. And then from there, I kind of stumbled into a publishing company. And it was a friend of mine that I'd gone to college with. His name's Steve Markland. And Steve's kind of an amazing publisher that's helped so many people like Casey Musgraves and Jeffrey Steele and countless people, really. Everyone loves Steve. So I just went to him and I said, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm good at these things. And he hired me to be basically an office manager, like a front desk person and a catalog manager. And I did not know, because when I was at Belmont, I was so focused on singing, even though I took these music business classes, I did not understand what publishing was. And when I landed there and I got to be around people like Jeffrey Steele and Big Al Anderson, who's a nominee for Hall of Fame this year. I just saw that a couple of days ago. John Hobbs was in and out. That's when I met Craig Wiseman and Mike Reed and Kai Fleming and people like that.
What year was this, roughly?
This was like 96 to 99, pretty much. And also, country music became more like pop music at that point. So it was a better fit for me at that point. But when I walked in there and I could hear people writing next to the room where I might be typing up a lyric or something, I was just in heaven. Like it was amazing. And I got to be around Steve's conversations with people like Allison Jones, who's still one of the most amazing A&R people around. She was doing it back then, and I could hear her talking to Steve about what songs she liked or didn't like. And then having been a singer, I felt like I can listen to songs and think about what it would be like to sing that song and what voice would go with that. And I wasn't pitching songs at that point. I was just learning. And
were you writing a lot?
No, not songs.
So you weren't much of a songwriter at this point?
No.
But you get to be a fly on the wall.
Yeah, I'm not a songwriter.
Okay. So but you get to be a fly on the wall to this music business thing.
Yes. And I understood it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm just at home around creative people.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can talk to them with authority because of my background. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting that I assumed you were a songwriter because in reading your bio, because of what you do with songwriters.
Yeah.
But it's funny because so many publishers, the majority of which I know, are not songwriters.
Yeah.
They're not, like one of my friends, his name's Eddie Tidwell, he said that he's like, I am terrible at writing songs, but he was at Irv Woolsey and George Strait's publishing company, Muy Bueno, forever. But he was like, I'm not a songwriter at all, but he had the brain to be able to hear a song and give feedback to the writer.
Right.
Or say, like, you could tweak this a little bit.
Right.
Or that's good, but it could be better. You know, those kinds of things.
Right.
So you probably had that skill as well, just being in a publishing house.
Yeah, I think that's a gift too. And most of the people that, that I have come up in the business with, and now, having had them as guests on my workshop, they all say the same thing. Like, I think it was Greg Gallo that came on, and I was like, I didn't know his complete background. I knew him. He's like, well, I started out a terrible bass player, and then I did it. Most people have done. Chris Oglesby, VP of BMG Publishing, he was in a family band, I believe, and sang. So most people have that background, I think.
Yeah.
And it makes them, maybe the fact that, for me, like I just recognized that life wasn't for me. And I have friends that are 40-year-old background singers that are amazing, but I just knew that wasn't for me, you know?
Yeah, and like to address that, because the it wasn't for me factor could be a lot of things for you, but for a lot of people that I've talked with, and you can speak into it if you want, but you don't have to. But when you have that gig or you're considered a sideman, there's no real guarantee that you are going to have work.
That's right.
and so it's very an uncertain lifestyle in which you live. And like you said, you pour your heart and soul into this, audition. Your last two, you don't get it. It's heartbreaking. But not only is it heartbreaking because of the rejection factor, it's heartbreaking because where's my next, paycheck going to come from, right?
Yeah. And it just...
Because for me, I'm that way. Like, I would never do the sideman gig because I have so many buddies that have done it and just left the road because they're like, it's too uncertain, it doesn't pay well enough, I'm away from my family, yada, yada, yada. But for other people, they love it and it's their thing. I just think it depends on your personality and wiring. But you made a big pivot, essentially.
Yes.
And I'm a believer in pivots because that's what I've done in my life, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
About every 5 years, something new has happened. Now, I have friends on Music Road that they've had these massive careers on the business side, just sticking with, the thing that they do. And I think that's amazing because, there's so many friends that have really been integral parts of so many people's careers because of their expertise in publishing and A&R management, all of these things. And I think that's great. For me, I've gone in these spurts of, I was at the company with Steve for about 5 years. Then I was part of starting another company called Combustion Music.
Which is very big.
Very big. They've, made it, a tremendous company. I was there for the first 5 years. Chris Farron and Ken Levitan were the partners at that time. And what's cool about that is we actually signed people that had never had cuts before. And Ken and Chris had gotten a couple of opportunities to do music supervision for a couple of films. The biggest one that we did was a film called We Were Soldiers, which is a Mel Gibson movie. And that one was cool because the director wanted original songs for the film. So it was fun. We were able to premiere the film at Belcourt and just invite all of these songwriters to see the film, and then they all wrote for it. And man, it was like a 3-month period where we had to get the songs, get them approved, and every song on that record has a collaboration. And there's a Dave Matthews, Johnny Cash collaboration on that record, which I was really surprised that the song is called For You. And I'm so sorry, but I'm scared I'm going to mess up the songwriters on that, so I'm not even going to say.
Okay.
But John Carter Cash was part of the production of that particular song. But in that song, Johnny Cash recites the 23rd Psalm.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what's on my mom's gravestone.
Oh, it was so gorgeous. And this would have been in about 2001, maybe, somewhere in there. And I remember, it's the only time I ever met John Carter, but I remember him sitting on the little couch in the mix room in our building, and just get teared up every time that passed. But I want more people to hear that because it was gorgeous. And I really don't know. It's on the We Were Soldiers soundtrack. So
sometimes those songs get lost when they're on the soundtracks.
Don't get me started on how many songs are lost.
Oh, I know. Like so many, as it's been said by so many, there's so many great songs that have never become hit songs that deserve to be a hit song.
It's true.
I want to say something about when you were at Combustion in those early years. You said something that I think is really important to expound upon, or just for people maybe that are listening that are not music people, which is we signed artists or writers, I should say, that did not have cuts.
Right.
What's a cut?
A cut is a song that they write that, I guess that's probably not the correct term. I've never thought about that before, because sometimes a song can get cut by an artist and not make the record.
That's true.
So this would be songs that are cut by an artist on a major label. This was, the definition at that time, that came out on an album, and they were there for mass consumption. And if you got really lucky, then you got a single. So I brought that up because the writers that we signed were Ashley Gorley, who I think at the time of this recording maybe had he may be at 77 now, but I think it's 76 number one songs.
Yeah.
76. So, I got to be around Ashley before any of that happened.
Before any cuts.
Right, before any cuts.
But you guys believed, you saw the potential.
Yeah, he was, he just always has had his nose to the grindstone and was the hardest worker and the coolest guy and the smartest guy. He knew the music business in and out and pretty much negotiated his deal himself. I mean, he got an attorney to, look it over, but he knew what he wanted, and, he was amazing. And Gordy Sampson, who at the time was a Canadian artist, we signed Gordy, J.T. Harding. A few years in, I did sign Blair Daly, and I think Blair had a cut. But there were a few more guys there as well. By 2005, all those guys had gotten their first number one song. And I mean, it's just, I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. And Chris was there, and we had some different pluggers that were in and out, Terry and Jameson, and Chris Van Belkom had just come on as my intern, and he runs Combustion now. Wow. And for people in Nashville that might be listening, that's where he got his name, the Falcon. He actually just goes by Falcon now. And I'll tell that story. This is insider because
tell the insider.
So Blair
scoop.
Daly comes in. Blair always had a list of things I'd like to write with this person. I'd like to do this. And, what about this pitch for this person? And he goes, I wonder if I could. Chris's name is Chris Van Belkom. And he goes, I want to get Chris Van Falcon to make me a CD, And I was like, I was probably a little put off by Blair's list. I love you, Blair. But and I was like, his name is Van Belkom, like that. And Blair and I just kind of looked at each other, and then we started laughing. He goes, nothing for me to call him the Falcon, because he had a nickname for everybody. And so that's when it started, and I had this little thing on my desk where it looked like a square, and you could put pictures all over it, but it had a little recording thing, and it was mostly maybe for your grandmother, and you could get your kid to go, I love you, Grandma, and record it, and they could just push that. But I recorded a Falcon call, and so I would just push that and it would go, Chris would come in. He was so eager to do it. Chris is going to kill me, but that's how it started, and he's the Falcon to this day. But yeah, I feel like we had more fun back then.
Yeah.
And
What
then-
year? So what year kind of was this? So fast forwarding into your career.
We're up to 2005.
Okay.
At this point, yeah.
So we're from the 90s.
Yeah.
We're into 2005.
Yeah. Then
More poppy.
Yeah. So.
You signed Ashley Gorley and.
Well, we all did.
I mean,
yeah.
as a team.
Yeah.
But being part of the team, believing in someone.
Yes.
I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
It's always a team, yeah.
Because I don't see many writers that don't have cuts getting publishing deals.
Yeah. Yeah. That was something you could do at that time. But it was also a very intentional way to, like, leanly, if that's a word, go into a publishing. Like, how can we do this? You know, we can believe in our talents as publishers to sign the right people, you know, and then that's why we were doing music supervision, like getting these little $500 placements, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
To just keep it going. It was a venture with Windswept.
Okay.
Jonathan Stone, worked that out for us. But so
from Combustion, where did you go?
I went to Sony Records to do A&R. And honestly, like, at that time, to me, that was the big coveted job. Like, if I could just get to the record label. And when I went, there were a lot of rumors about a merger between Sony and BMG. And I just really wanted to do that job, and I really wanted to elevate myself. And, you know, the other thing too is people will say, if you're a good assistant for someone, it's hard to get out of that role. And I had started out as an assistant to one of my bosses, and I become a VP of Combustion. There weren't that many people there, so, you know, you be the
Still
VP.
Sounds good.
Yeah, here you go. But I also had a lot of assistant responsibility still, you know, and that also happens when you're there from the ground up. Like, you know, this is how our cataloging system works. This is who to call when the HVAC breaks. This is, you know, here's a writer. I need to plug this song. So it was a little bit of everything. And by the way, I learned how to plug songs because a bunch of amazing women invited me into a plugger group. Has anybody ever talked about a plugger group? Now,
Not on the podcast.
Yeah.
So I think it would be cool to hear that.
Yeah. So, you know, at that time it was called a song plugger. Now it's called A&R. And I think that's a better name for it, honestly, because that is where your development is starting at a publishing company. So these women are Carrie Edwards, who manages Luke Bryan now. We used to pitch songs to Luke in this plugger group because Carrie just believed in him so much. And this was, you know, in that same time frame. Who else was in there? Stephanie Green, Kelly King. Kelly is, you know, doing a label with Jay DeMarcus, and she's been a fantastic publisher all these years. She signed Brothers Osborne and saw that career through, and many songwriters. And she's the one that actually pitched Jesus Take the Wheel, which was a Gordy Sampson, his first #1 song, that, you know, back in the Combustion days.
Yeah.
And, you know, because we were in this group, we were able to set up this co-write with Brett James and Hillary Lindsay and Gordy.
So it's really like a collaboration,
Yeah.
back to that word that we used. Yeah.
And Chris Lacey was in this group. Chris was an amazing publisher. She's co-heads Warner Brothers Records now. Liz O'Sullivan ran Seagull Publishing for many years. She was amazing. It was just a really powerful group of young women, you know, and so I learned so much from all of them. But anyway, I go into Sony Records. I get to work with Miranda, Lambert, Ashley Monroe, Jesse Alexander, all songwriter artist.
Yeah.
And I worked on a record with Miranda called Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And what's kind of cool about that became her first album of the year, and that was at the ACM Awards. And then BMG and Sony merged. Mr. Joe Galani's team took over, and I worked for John Grady and Mark Wright, and our team lost out in that deal. But I'm still really glad that I went. And the other just thing that was going on at that time, which is kind of funny because I was a part of Jesus Take the Wheel, which catapulted Carrie Underwood's career, right? So she comes off this TV show called American Idol. The people at Idol and the record label side of that group, they were like, oh, wow, this is really working. We need a country A&R person on the road with us. And so I got the call for that through Chris Oglesby. So I went to work on American Idol, which was kind of fun,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And this is like when Idol was really popping.
Everybody was like, Carrie was just such a huge star at that point. It looked like that's, all eyes on American Idol. And it was a very closed off camp. It wasn't in Nashville. It was a TV show. LA people worked a little bit differently. In Nashville, we share a lot of things, because our writers are working with this writer and you just get more synergy. Like, you don't burn bridges in Nashville. And LA is more like protect your property. And to be fair for them, all these kids were having careers and people were trying to poach them, so they were very protected. But it was very cool to be on the inside of that. And one of my good friends that I made at that time, made a lot of good friends that I still keep in touch with, but she now runs the whole show, Megan Michaels, so.
Wow. And it's still going strong.
She's just killing it.
And that lineup with Lionel,
Luke,
and Katy
Perry.
Yeah. That's a good combo.
Yeah.
There's a synergy there too.
Yeah. They've pulled through with that,
Yeah.
So I got to do that, and then Chris Oglesby, he was partnered with 19 Entertainment, and Chris did the audition tours sometimes too. But he started a writer management company in Nashville. Nobody had done that before. Chris did it, and he asked me to be a part of it. So I would work on Idol 3 months out of the year, and then I would manage songwriters. And
what was that again? It was not a publishing company. You said he was the first one to do it.
It was writer management. And so it's a little bit different way to look at it. Like, as a writer, the benefit would be you have somebody who's focused in on you, maybe looking at other opportunities that maybe your publisher's not focused in on. I mean,
just like an artist would have, like a performer would have a management team. Songwriters generally don't, but then to have someone that has your best interest in mind, and in management, if your writer's doing good, you're doing good, right?
Right.
So to have the best interest of the writer is an interesting concept. I never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's more common in LA, really, and in Nashville, the publishers do such a great job that I don't think a lot of people need it, especially if you're like really genre specific. I think where it can come in really handy is maybe if you're a writer producer and you're, just maybe bringing in more production opportunities for you, or say you're a writer that really wants to focus on pop or something like that, and you have an amazing publisher that is so tapped into country, but your manager could work on going out and trying to open up those doors for you, or maybe just thinking outside the box, like maybe you feel like taking a certain trip to a different community will help you go further, but your publisher's not ready to pay for that yet or something, I mean, just it's unique to the writer, and sometimes the 2 times I've done it on my own as a writer manager, my publishing skills helped in some cases get that person ready for a publishing deal. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm going to leverage my relationships, even though you're not signed, to get you in certain rooms to see, if we can get you there quicker. So it can be a combination of things.
So from that idol and that management point, then where do you pivot?
And then Mark Driscoll set up a meeting with Tim Dubois. I never met Tim Dubois before, and Tim was about to go into ASCAP and take over ASCAP, and I think I had the best meeting.
Did you say Mark Driscoll?
Yes.
The pastor?
No.
Okay.
I don't think he's a pastor.
Because there was a pastor named Mark Driscoll that was very controversial. And
Mark has been at ASCAP a couple different times.
Okay, and for the record, not the pastor. Okay.
Yeah, not the pastor, but a good friend. And Tim Dubois ran Arista Records. Everyone that I knew that worked for Tim Dubois just loved Tim Dubois.
That's great.
And so I went over and met with him and just saw immediately why everyone felt that way about him. And
what was it?
He's just so lovable. He's fun and personable and creative and human. I remember, when he offered me a job, like he said something like, he was talking about the package or whatever, and because if you're going to ASCAP, like my thought was, oh my gosh, how do you sleep? There's something every night and every hour of the day. And even when you're at the grocery store, a songwriter's in line behind you, like, I was nervous about it. And he was just, telling me, what was expected of me. But he's like, hey, sometimes things happen, and sometimes your pet dies, and when he said that, I was thinking, like, you mean if something happens to my dog, like he would be understanding about that? So I just knew I wanted to work for him. I know that sounds silly, but I love my dogs, and it was important to me that he, I just felt like this person gets me. And then I learned another thing from him, as a leader, like when you show your people that you have their back, that means everything, and early on at ASCAP, a situation came up where I had actually, it's probably the only time this has ever happened, but I had gotten sick and I ended up in the hospital. It was just very quick, and everything's fine. But I had missed, a week or so of work and gotten behind, and someone had been really upset about that. And I went to Tim and I said, hey, you might get a call because, I think this person's upset with me. And he picked up the phone right in front of me and just called him and just said, look, and I was like,
just
wow.
laid it out.
Yeah. And he didn't question me or anything. Like, no, what exactly happened? He just trusted me. So that was a big leadership lesson to see in action, because I just knew how that made me feel. And I think that's why he's, has the respect in everything that he does. He's about to go into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, by the way.
Oh, wow.
That's in November.
That's cool.
Yeah.
An Okie.
Yeah.
So what was your eventual role at ASCAP?
Eventually, co-head of ASCAP.
Co-head of ASCAP.
Yeah.
Now, can we just talk about what a PRO is real quick for people that are listening, so they understand if they're not Nashville or writer inclined?
Well, I think it's changing a little bit, isn't it?
But when you were there, like
when
the
I
traditional,
was there,
because there's the three big ones.
Yeah, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and your PRO. PRO stands for Performance Royalty Organization, and that's where your money comes in. From radio performances, film to any live performance. And I think
you collect royalties,
right? And so that's its function. But I was co-heading the creative team, so I love that they have creative teams there to support the writers, because if you don't have writers signed to your organization, you can't go out and get the licenses that you need to collect the money, to get it back to the songwriters. But this is interesting. Like, I'm so just hyper focused on the creative part and the development part, and like that's where I thrive. And so when you get into all of the other things, like the minutia of what was going on and legally with in the DOJ and things like that, I started to get a little uncomfortable that like I needed to know all of that to be able to talk responsibly to people about it. And really, like, my talents and gifts were in that creative part, where I was trying to help everybody that I could, take meetings all the time, really make people feel seen and heard and encouraged. But then there were some people I felt, okay, this person needs to get in front of a publisher. This person needs to connect with it. That was just where it's what publishers do and writer managers do. So that's where I was most comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so during that time, I just noticed there was a huge problem, because there were so many mergers happening on Music Row, and a lot of times those mergers ended up in a creative person being let go. And so there's more work on the creative people that were at those companies and less time for them to meet with a random songwriter. And historically, that's what Nashville has been, like open doors, like, let me send you to this person, to that person. Well, they didn't really have time. But one morning I was blow drying my hair and I just got the complete idea of, you have like 15 writers right now that need the community to help develop. And so here's what you do. You just get those people together. You go ask 15 of your friends, hey, will you do one 30-minute meeting a month with a writer that we're going to send you from ASCAP? We've vetted. And they all were in on it. And then my friend Ryan Beisel, who was my coworker at that time, worked with me on this idea. We came up with a great name called the GPS Project. So GPS stands for Guidance from Publishers for Songwriters. And so we put these people in, and then every month I would put them up, set them up with a publisher. But one of the keys was I wanted them to have back-to-back meetings, because sometimes I would meet with people and not remember because the volume, So it was key to have a back-to-back meeting. So that publisher could be like, okay, Stefan, I really like this song, but see what you can do on the bridge and da-da-da, and we'll look at it again next month. It was just to build relationships. So people started building those relationships, and then they started getting signed. And that is a program that they still do today because of that. So that, I feel really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was part of some programs like that where I had the ability to go before publishers. They were kind of more of a speed pitch kind of an idea.
Yeah.
But it was, to me, kind of similar to what you're saying, where I got to get feedback from an actual publisher.
Yes. And I think feedback is really important. And I also think a lot of times in those situations, I know like the biggest thing to a songwriter is like, I need to get my songs heard. I do one thing in my business just for those people. It's called meet, greet, and listen. It's like, okay, we'll meet, we'll talk, and I'll listen to your song. Scratch that itch with that. But I think this is one of the biggest things that people, they hear it all the time, but they don't really get it. And that is the biggest thing that can get you down the road is just a genuine connection with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't have anything to do with your music.
That's so important. Just to reiterate that, the genuine connection with somebody. Like, not, like you said, music aside, it's the relationship.
It's the relationship, it's the connection. And people don't, they really don't believe me, but every publisher friend that I've had on my workshop has said the same thing. So let's scoot up to 2020.
Yeah, let's.
So I'm skipping over artist management, but that's okay.
That's okay. You've done it all.
I learned stuff in artist management, but I also learned there are people cut out for that, and I think I'm cut out for what I'm doing now.
Yeah, and we want to get to that.
Yeah,
too.
So in 2020, it's funny because we're taping in a town that in March of 2020, myself and Nathan Chapman and Jake Rose shot a video in a cow pasture not far from here, just the three of us. And we were just so excited about this video coming out and this thing, and then this is part of the reason why I started my company, because, by the way, I had to throw my tennis shoes away that day because it was just like, can imagine what we were stepping in. But we had a great team around Jake, like CAA, Sony Music Publishing, these Grammy award-winning producers, and everything stopped. So my mind went back to, what about the writers and artists that don't have a team yet? So I put out a flyer. I was at home, by myself, put out a flyer and said, let's keep your creative momentum going. I'll meet with you on Zoom. And then when I hit send, I was like, oh, why did I do that? And then I think it was Courtney Cole, this friend of mine. She wrote me right back, I would love to meet with you. And then another person. So I was on Zoom right away, just meeting with writers, talking with them like I would do at ASCAP. Then I went into May, and then I was like, I also signed up for a course that taught me how to do online work. So I turned it into a workshop like I was doing at ASCAP. And I just kept going with that. And so actually July, 4 years ago, that's when all of this started, and it's still going strong, and it's developed into an online business where I can talk with songwriters around the world, really. And I'm providing live workshops where people can connect, expand their community, but like really get that mentorship from somebody like me who meets a writer where they are. And just like I'm saying, I know you think you need a meeting with a publisher, but here's what you really need.
Here's the truth.
Yeah, let me help you with that. So one of the first things I was teaching people, and it was a very creative process for me, because I would just think like, okay, what did I do when I signed somebody? So I put together this thing called 4 Steps Closer to a Publishing Deal. The first step is connection. You want, like we did today. I've never met you, and it was kind of instant connection with you and Haley. Yeah. So that's so important. That makes me want to be around you again. It makes me want to,
of course.
And then the music happens. Now, other publishers may have this in different orders, but I would say all 4 of these things are present. So, do I love your music? That is a huge thing, because I'm going to be selling it, basically, which that's not normally a term that we use. Like, did you sell any? But like, I'm going to be.
At the end of the day,
you
it's
are
business.
selling
You're
it.
selling. It's revenue.
Yeah.
They're looking for money.
Yes, and my passion is to be so strong that I have to take it to somebody else and just be so psyched for them to hear it. But do I love the music? And then the third thing is, where do you see yourself going? What are your goals? And then where do I see you going? Just having, met with you. And do those things align? So there's got to be an alignment there. Like an example would be, if you wanted, nothing else than to be an artist, and I didn't see that for you, but I liked your songs. I'd really love to go pitch your songs, but I don't know about this artist thing. That's not going to work out. But if you're in alignment, great. And then the fourth thing is something that can give, the songwriters a relief, which is, can I help get you there? Is that publisher you're meeting with the one to do the job? Or are you so enamored that somebody's just into what you're doing that you're just going to take that publishing deal and they actually can't help you get where you're going? Now, sometimes even just doing that will at least provide a little more momentum for you. But, because many people, like I'm thinking of Josh Osborne, I think he had 4 publishing deals before he landed at Black River, and then had like 50 cuts in a year. He had gotten all that experience. Then he lands at the right place with the right person, Celia Froelich. And that was, he was ready. She knew what to do with them. And there you go, So anyway.
I think it's interesting that that's kind of how you organically, like life just like opened the door to that space, like you said, you had the idea and then you just did it and you took action and executed the idea, and then it just turned into something because there was a need.
Yeah.
And I find, and I wanted to draw a quick parallel, I'm big into therapy and like mental health, and it's something that I like to talk about in a lot of episodes, but just my own personal struggles with anxiety and depression and stuff. And traditional therapy is, the therapist is always just asking questions. So a lot of people these days are going actually to life coaches instead of traditional therapists, because they get actual feedback on what they should do with their lives to be happier, healthier, or whatever their goal may be. And I kind of see a parallel in that what you are doing is essentially providing the ability for someone to come through and it's not the just quick sit down, but it's the thorough from point A to B, C, D of an artist or a writer correct? Would you agree? Would you see a little bit of a parallel on the coaching side?
Yeah. I think the tools from life coaching just marry so brilliantly with what I'm doing. So I do offer private sessions with people that want to go deeper, because the music business is hard, and because of, it's an interesting brand of, that's why I'm taking a life coaching course. I'm a life coach in training.
So you're doing that as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I'm in a 9-month course. And what I've learned about it, Stephan, is that the reason I love it so much I've come up with my own kind of brand of life coaching called creative wellness coaching, because sometimes people will come in, like they'll have, a devastating moment in their career, maybe similar to what I had in my 20s. But like I said back then, maybe I'm not meant to do this. Like, that's a pivotal moment for you as a creative, So is that true? Or is it just a limiting belief? But if we can talk about it, I'm not there to tell you one way or the other. In life coaching, you're being guided by someone to get to your own answers. Mm-hmm. And I've just found if you give somebody that space, they will come up with it. They will come up with their own answers. And the way that I know that is because you have to be the client as much as you have to be the coach in life coach training. And that's someone's held that space for me. I come up with my own answers. But you know what? This is the parallel to songwriting. I've been meaning to write about this, but say you're in a co-write, and say you're with an artist, and if you bring a excellent idea in, and you're writing with for another artist project that day, are you going to just hammer your idea, or if this artist has an idea, are you going to help them write their idea? You're probably going to help them write their idea because they're the artist. So if you look at creative wellness coaching like that, I want to help you fulfill your idea, because that's going to be your path. My path in my 20s was not to be a background singer anymore. It was to go, follow this new territory into publishing. And then, you get to a point in life where now, I get this aerial view of my life, and it doesn't just go back to being a background singer in a band. It goes back to actually getting encouragement. And this kind of tears me up a little bit, but at 11 years old, my mom put me in voice lessons because I was shy, not because I was a great singer. And my teacher encouraged me. After 2 years, I started at 9. After 2 years, I finally was on the microphone by myself, and he encouraged me in front of all these other kids. And I'm a person that needs encouragement. If he had made fun of me or anything like that, I probably would have never come back, and we wouldn't be sitting here. So now my whole business is about authentically encouraging people, authentically encourage them. I'm compassionate. I want to help you. I'm not going to feed you a line to do. I want you to be where you are supposed to be, where you want to be, where you're called to be. But it's just so interesting to me that ties into something that happened at 11 years old that changed my life.
Wow.
You know?
That's amazing. That's beautiful.
It is, and I have my voice teacher's picture on my piano at home. Like, he died when I was a senior in high school, and I mean, it just changed my life being able to. Joe Kincaid, that's his name. So, matter of fact, when I toured with Steve Winwood, all these people had, like, you know, played with Fleetwood Mac and James Brown and all this stuff. And I mean, my gosh, Steve Winwood, you know, his career. And my tour book said student of Joe Kincaid. That's all I had, you know. So
that's awesome. That's so funny. But you still got the gig. So I want to like kind of go vulnerable with you. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Because you talk about the creative wellness coaching.
Yeah.
And is it cool if we do a little bit of it and people can see what it's like?
Sure.
And we do it on me?
Let's do it.
Are you cool with that?
Absolutely.
It's just way off the cuff.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a little about my background?
Yeah.
And how I feel about the music business, especially in doing this podcast?
Yeah.
I've sat down. I had this dream since I was a little kid. I started playing guitar when I was 5. And basically, I just knew my whole life. I was playing in church from 6th grade all the way until I got hired to play music in church and lead worship. And then I was doing it all the way until I was about 32, leading worship in church. Mm-hmm. But along that way, I was like, I'm going to move to Nashville. I started coming here for about 6 years before we moved here, and we've been here 5 years, so about 11 years-ish, meeting with publishers and doing all this stuff, right? And I had this dream, and I was playing out in California. I had a band, and a booking agent, and a manager, and we were playing up and down, and a lot of cover stuff. But I mean, big fish in a small pond. Mm-hmm. And then I came to Nashville, and I did this guitar competition. I met Vince Gill, and I met Larry Fitzgerald, and Larry Fitzgerald introduced me to Jody Williams when he was over at BMI. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, wow, this is like, I got these people pulling me in under their wing kind of a thing. And I'm not going to say that I was the best songwriter in the world, because I think that a lot of songwriters would say their best songs ahead of them, you know? Mm-hmm. But I was realizing in the business side, the money wasn't there, or just like the more I saw the inner workings of the business, the more I got really discouraged. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I have a wife, and like now I have a son, but I feel like God put this dream in me and like this gift to be able to do something. But the side on the revenue or generating revenue or monetary, you know, the draws are small on pub deals. You still have to work another job. And it's almost like, some people say the 90s was a real heyday for writers. And someone I interviewed said, his name's John Deloney. He works at the Dave Ramsey Corporation. And he was like, those houses in Brentwood were built with songwriter money. But you have to realize that songwriter money won't buy those houses in Brentwood anymore. Unless you're getting singles and you're getting where the money's at.
That's right, yeah.
So I was always like, I only want to write songs for me as an artist, because that's what I want to do. It's what I've always wanted to do. And I feel like I'm grieving the fact that the reality set in for me that in order, even if I got a record deal, it wouldn't guarantee me anything unless I had an incredible amount of clout like Cody Johnson had when he signed, just by hitting the road, you know? Because I feel like, and you know this, and like traditional back in the day, you mentioned Irving Azoff, like the Eagles were sent out to go get better at writing songs. They were developed and the artist development's not there. And it seems like labels are looking to buy a ready-to-go business that's generating revenue. So for someone like me that has seen all this stuff in the business and the lack of money and the streaming and the non-record sales and the 360 deals, you know, it's like, what does a guy like me do? Because all of a sudden it's like I don't pick up the guitar and I see it hanging in the house and it's a reminder of failure now instead of a reminder of my passion, you know?
I think you said a big word a minute ago. You know, you're grieving. Say more about that. Like,
well, the grieving is like I'm grieving the dream that it's not what I thought it would be. You know, I had this idea that I would move to Nashville and I'd get a publishing deal and then I'd get a cut and I'd get a record deal and I'd be on the road and I'd be support and then I would work my way up and then eventually be headlining, and I had it, you know, I'd write it and I'd try to manifest it and do all this stuff, and I was like, I'm going to have a number one song this year and get a publishing deal or whatever it may be. But then it's like these things never happened, and I'm also a believer, and so I read the Bible, and it says like a man plans his step, but God guides his path. So then all of a sudden I'm doing this podcast, and it's helping encourage people and educating people and all this stuff, and it's like a pivot in your life where you were like, I don't want to be on the road anymore. And for me, it was like, well, I've seen what kind of the music bit where it's at right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my bills with doing that, like, because there's no guarantee. So there's a huge risk factor. You know, I'd be incredibly exposed if I just went after my music dream. You know what I'm saying? So the grief is like this thing that I worked my whole life at seems to not be what I always thought it was.
Is it your passion evolving a little bit? Can you see?
Yeah. You know what? The honest truth is that I'd rather be able to, especially having a son now who's 17 months old, I would rather, because I never chased fame, you know? Like when we're young or you learn to sing, it's like you were never doing it because you were like, I'm going to end up on the road with Steve Winwood. You can't. And that 11-year-old that got on stage and sang did it out of probably the most pure place ever, you know? And I released an album when I was 17 of 10 songs. And they're the most pure songs I've ever written because no one had, they just came straight out of me. I recorded them, and that's what it was. And there was no like, you need to change this or that or this format or the length of this or blah, 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 blah. And so fast forwarding and answering your question, I would rather have financial stability than the risk, because I can't afford the risk because of the responsibility. But deep inside my heart, I have this vision of John Mayer at one of the Crossroads festivals, and he opened with his song Belief. And for probably the last 10 years, I've had that vision of me being that person, of like that, and it's a reoccurring vision. I had it yesterday. So it's like this music thing's here, and it's still calling my name. And I'm not making a podcast to try to like get a music anything. Like it's my goal with this is not to try to like meet publishers so I can get a record deal or meet songwriters. It's to like educate people and help people. And I often say, tell things the younger me didn't know. You know, what would I go back and tell the younger me? And so I think that's I would have told the younger me, like, hey, you need to learn to become an entrepreneur and a business person because you're not going to be able to fund your life off of music. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, I'm very focused around the financial aspect mm-hmm. because it's just, life's expensive, mm-hmm. you know? Inflation's crazy.
I feel like you're in this unique spot where, like, you're grieving something, you're still pulled towards something with your music, and
we talked about it before we started talking on the podcast. Like, my mom passed, so I'm grieving my mom, and then my dad's health's bad, and I'm grieving that too, because I'm the one that takes him to his appointments at the VA, and he's got pulmonary fibrosis, so he's on oxygen 24/7 on 8 to 10 liters of oxygen. And so it's like I'm grieving the music thing, my mom, my dad. Like, there's a lot of grief, and it can be overwhelming, you know.
Say I was your friend, and I think we are friends now.
Yeah.
And
LeAnn's my friend. You're my friend.
What if I told you all of the things that you just told me? And, you know, would that be, would you tell me, like, oh, LeAnn, you need to take action, and you need to be humping it down on Music Row right now, just trying to get, or would you tell me, like, wow, there's a lot going on, and you might need to rest a little bit, you know? I mean, this is...
Yeah, that's what I would tell me, for sure.
Grief is a time for rest, and it also can be a really unique time, like when you're in that process, you know, you can think of it like winter, you know, and then maybe you see a little, you know, piece of grass coming up or something. Like you'll get these ideas. Like, you started your podcast, and it seems like you used the word pure when you made your record at 17. It seems like this is a really pure thing that fits your personality and your curiosity so well.
Yeah, I love it. I love just sitting down and talking with people.
And having
That's my favorite thing in the world.
Conversations. Me too.
It's the relationship. Like you said earlier, the first thing was the relationship aspect before the music.
Right.
And that's kind of how I've always been. And I was like, man, I could do this podcast and literally just make friends.
Yeah.
And that is a lot more fun than having to travel, be super sweaty, put a bunch of gear on stage, play a few songs and make no money.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is much more enjoyable. You know what I'm saying? In terms of the touring life, when you're schlepping gear out of a U-Haul trailer and doing all that stuff. But then there's still that part of me, and maybe you can answer the question, like, I feel like the dream died. In my mind, there was almost like a death. But at the same time, I'm 35 as we make this episode. Do you think that my once passion for music can be reignited at some point in the future?
Absolutely. Do you think that it could be?
I don't know. I think that, yes. I think that a lot can happen in a short amount of time as well. But I often wonder, is it like, he was another guy that moved to Nashville that gave it a go. You know, we moved here in 2019, COVID hit, music business shut down. Like, a lot of things changed. My parents were living on our couch in a one-bedroom apartment in the Gulch. And we helped my mom find a house, and my dad find a house with us. And so, like, my whole time in Nashville living here has been very family-focused and grief-oriented. Mm-hmm. So I don't even know that I was ever able to give it even like 80% of my effort into truly going after what my dream was. But then life positioned me in an interesting place with all the grief. So I made the big pivot, and I really feel like it was a God thing doing this podcast, And again, I'm not like ever trying to leverage it for my music career. I don't even talk about, I've never once said like, go listen to my music on anything or talked about my music. I just happen to be a musician, you know, but since that's what you do in the coaching side and asking me the question about grief, what would I tell that person is, yeah, you have a lot on your plate. You need a rest. And that down the road, you know, stuff could happen musically. I think we're all, and you can speak to this, we're all chasing the age thing. You know, you might even feel it. I feel like, because, you know, when you're, especially I feel like for female artists, they have this immense pressure to like be successful when they're younger. And then once you get a certain age, you're not on radio anymore, you know, the camera's on to another young pretty girl. Or same with the guys, you know, like young good looking dude with a six-pack that can sing, you know. It's like but then I look at Stapleton and I'm like, man, Chris Stapleton's killing it, and he's so unique. He's just himself. And it's not like he he had a bunch of hits. He was a songwriter, but he didn't hit in his career till later. Or Kenny Rogers, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really know. I this past week I went to a show of a guy that I dearly love. I used to manage him. Same guy we shot the video on March 20th. His name's Jake Rose. And at the time we were working on this country record deal for him, and he's amazing. And, you know, the songs, like I haven't heard better songs than these. I really haven't. And so COVID shut us down, you know, and during that time, Jake noticed he was in a rock band when he was a kid, basically. And the rock band is called New Medicine. It started getting streams. And so it's very easy for him to write, you know, for New Medicine. He put a couple songs out. Fast forward, they have something like 1.5 million listeners. This song called Fire Up the Night is over 100,000 streams on Spotify. Like, the New Medicine is completely taken off. And I just saw him for the first time Wednesday night.
Wow.
And, you know, not that Jake is not old by any stretch, but, you know, it wasn't that kid doing that. Like, you don't know how your journey's going to play out, you know. But I do think that there are times and seasons, even if you had, you know, made successful records and you were on this cycle or whatever, like, there are times for replenishment, and life circumstance definitely, you know, pushes you into that. You just had Vince Gill on too, and I mean, the way I understand it, his first like really big song came a little later in his career, and he had to go through a lot of stuff to get there. And I think, you know, the thing that we've been talking about today mainly is just where's that next thing? Where's that next thing? And, you know, I didn't have a plan to go be a publisher and A&R person and do this and do that. I just stumbled along to the pool. And you mentioned the verse that, what was the verse that you said?
A man plans his steps, but God guides his path.
Yeah. And
I believe that.
Did you recently read that, or how did that come back up in your life?
I mean, I think that it was in kind of correlation with the launch of this podcast, because we launched with 6 episodes already done. And our first recording was not Vince, but Vince Gill was the first one we put out, just because I wanted to, like, you know, hit it with, come out strong, right? And I think around that time I read that, and then I read that, like, there was another, I think it's a psalm, but it was talking about how, like, God knew us before we were born, you know, our inmost being. He knows the hairs on our head, our comings and our goings, like what we do, you know. And it was interesting because it was like, I'm not in control. My mom died of brain cancer. Like, I wasn't in control of that. And I think we have this idea that we're in control of things, and we try to, like, hold on to the outcome, and we can't control the outcome quite often. And I feel like God put me in this chair with this mic for a reason. And I think, like, I would happily, at this point in my life, say bye to the writing song stuff, because at the end of the day, I want to do what is God's will for me, what my path is meant to be. And maybe it was like all those years of music led me to a point where I can sit down and have a conversation with LeAnn, who's been in the music business since she was very young, you know? I mean, you've been doing it for basically what feels like to me your whole life. So I'm happy with that. But I'm also, like, still grieving the guitar that hangs on the wall. So it's a weird juxtaposition, you know? But I mean, there's a part of me that would say, I want to sit down with you on a coaching session, and I want you to hear my songs. I want your feedback, and I want to know what you would think. And if I had a pub deal, I'd still do this podcast. And that would really give me validation that when Larry Fitzgerald and I sat down and he said, I'm closing Fitzgerald Hartley, and he said, if I wasn't, I would be your manager. And that was validating.
Yeah.
You know, like that. And it, like, gives me chills to think about it, because he believed in me that much. And he was like, I feel like you're a younger, like, Vince. Like, you remind me of what he was like when he was younger. Because, like, I play guitar, so I have some guitar chops, right? And the way I write and sing, it's not super back roads and trucks and stuff. It's kind of LA in the 70s vibes. But, like, that was so validating. But then also life, things have become so deflating when things didn't pan out. You know what I'm saying? So it's just so weird. Like, and I don't know. I don't want to ramble and go on about myself. But since it's the wellness piece and the coaching that you're going to school for, but that you already probably do, even though it might not be called coaching, or you have the certification or whatever is required to be called a coach. But it's just interesting to be me where I'm at. Because I still have the itch, partially.
I see that.
You know?
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do, again, with this podcast. I want everybody to know this podcast is for helping to educate, encourage, inspire, mental health, wellness, taking care of your body. Like, there's these things that are really important to me outside of music that we have guests on that have nothing to do with music, you know. But I have this little coal. Maybe it's the last little ember in me, but it's still burning, you know.
Well, that's funny that you use the word ember, because I do think that people that want this so bad, you know, that, you know, it's none of it's easy, but it might be easier to be like, oh, I met with this person and they didn't give me a deal, or I got my song to this person, I didn't hear back. You hear that a lot, but it is our responsibility to start a spark, you know, to give somebody something that they too can get excited about. and give them a reason to want to help you. So like going back to like the connection and then the music, like people, you know, a part of their lives would be taken up being your champion, you know? So what you want that genuine excitement about what you're doing. But it does start with you. They can think you're the greatest guy in the world, you know, but I ended up managing my best friend, but I didn't want to do that because of our friendship, until she's a songwriter. Her name's Kat Gravitt. She was a CSAC Writer of the Year, but she played me this song called Numb. And that was the song that gave me the spark that I needed to help her, you know? And she was my best friend. I wanted to help her. But that was the song, for whatever reason, was written with James LeBlanc. And it was just so, it was this song about James's addiction, and it just blew me away. But I knew at that moment that if Kat could be in a room and a part of that kind of song, that now I could work with her as a songwriter, you know?
Yeah.
But you just said, like, there's still this ember. And we're, you know, sometimes with what I'm doing, like straight up coaching is one thing. Sometimes there's a mentorship involved. And I feel like I'm putting on a mentor hat a little bit more right now, but
which is cool for people to see, I feel like, because everybody's journey's different.
Yeah.
So like where at my place in life where I come to you, you're putting on your mentor hat.
Yeah, because my hunch, because I've been there, we did have a conversation before this. I've lost both my parents. You've lost your mom. And we talked about grief a little bit. And when you're in that period, it's hard to be really productive. It's hard to find, you know, when your passion comes in and you're in that flow of creating things, like it's, I mean, I guess you can get there through depression, but like it's a very exciting, life-giving thing, and you've got to be in a great place to be open to that. And you've managed to create something anyway, which is this, and that just makes me think this is what you're supposed to be doing right now. But the terms that you use, like the ember, and you've had this vision about, you know, the John Mayer song and that kind of thing, and the verse that you recite, like my guess is that guitar won't stay on the wall, you know, for the rest of its life. Like you're going through a period of a different kind of creation right now, and you don't know where that's going to open up to.
Yeah, and I could potentially foresee myself having, you know, like the whole life experience thing. I'm a different person than I was 5 years ago or 2 years ago.
Me too.
And so, yeah, and we grow. And so what I'm writing songs about eventually, or now, because I still, like, my son plays guitar, even though he's 17 months old. He has a little guitar.
Oh my
gosh. Like, I'll get my guitar out and he'll put them on my lap. And so I still pick it up. And actually, I've kind of like found a little more love for the instrument because of my son. And I want him to experience the joy of music, and he loves music. He's the biggest music fan, and we'll go put on a vinyl and he'll just like dance. He loves to dance. Or I'll play guitar and he'll just dance. And so that's been cool. And I'm still writing songs and making voice notes in my phone, but it's not one of those things where I'm like committing all my energy and time to it, you know? So it's there. But like you said, like the psychiatrist said, I have a compounded complex trauma. So like that makes it hard to when you look at Maslow's hierarchy, there's all these basic needs that are supposed to be met before you can be creative.
Right.
Like you want to create out of a place not of your sympathetic nervous system where you're full of cortisol and stress, but your parasympathetic nervous system where you're in a place of peace and you're able to be relaxed and open. Mm-hmm. And it's been interesting just kind of having more of an education on how I'm feeling, and that theoretically, to be creative, you want to be in a really good spot in life. But then for me, I'm like, it's flipped on its head where it's like I'm being creative to be able to do all the other things, which is, even though I'm in a weird spot, I can still be creative, but the music thing is just sidelined, I guess you would say. But it's like am I going to do it or am I not going to do it? It's like an unknown. It's a weird thing. And I'm not, I guess, looking for the answer. But it was interesting what you said, that, you know, the winter thing. And I've kind of thought about that myself a bit. You know, you want to know something special?
Absolutely.
You're the 20th guest, my 20th podcast.
Oh.
And you did say that you listened to the last one, and I said it in the intro, but I want to get this right. 90% of podcasts stop after 10.
I heard you say this,
yeah.
The stats.
And then 99% stop after 20. And you're 20. And so it's like a milestone for me of celebration, because I've really stuck it out. And then of that amount of people, only so many do video. It's like 23% are doing video. So that has just like proven something to me, which is very interesting. Mm-hmm. So thanks for being on my 20th episode, by the way.
I'm so glad that you asked me to do this. And it was... It's everything about this has been a gift for me so far, and I think I just want to point out, you're like, I stuck it out. You're a stick it out kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I'll just say this: I'm looking forward to hearing what you create when you get a little more into the spring.
Yeah, I like that. Mm-hmm. And I want to go back. Like I don't want to end there. I just wanted to kind of go down that route and just pick your brain on a very complicated subject, you know. And even with my therapist, it's like we don't ever figure it out. But it's like, what would you tell the other version of you or your friend LeAnn if she was going through the same thing as you? So I'm just working through life, you know, like we all are.
Yeah.
And I just like to be vulnerable. And so I shared a little about me, but I want to talk about, because I think what you're doing is so important. And even it was encouraging just what you told me, like you're looking forward to, like that to me is light at the end of the tunnel. You're looking forward to, you know, what you may hear in the future. That's special to me. So just that little bit, I want to go back to creative wellness coaching, because you have some events coming up, and I think you may be the best, maybe non-hidden or hidden treasure that's existing out there as a resource for people that are in that position of the person that listens to this podcast and doesn't know what to do, or the person that moved to town but doesn't know what to do, or the person that is having meetings but isn't landing the plane. And I feel like because of your experience and your years and years of basically doing everything in the business besides like being the artist, you know, going the artist route, you're such a resource. And so the fact that someone can even sit down with you in the first place and have your time and knowledge is amazing. Because I believe people need to learn from the people that came before them. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you made plenty of mistakes in your life and career.
Absolutely.
And you've learned from those mistakes. Yeah. And you can help other people not make the same mistakes that you've made. Because it's like so much easier to streamline the process if instead of us having to learn the hard way, we can learn from someone that learned the hard way. Or someone that's been there. Instead of us trying to figure it out on our own, like, how do I do this? I can have someone that's going to help me and guide me and be there and be a champion of me. And it sounds like, and from reading about what you do and looking at your socials and everything, it's very much encouraging.
That's the word. I mean, that's what I'm going for. If there was one word, it would be that. And
I'm glad I said it.
Yeah,
then.
and it does come from a real place, like, in 2018, after my dad died, and I was working from home for the first time. That was a very confusing, depressing time, and I had to rest a lot, and slowly, I started getting, at least the desire to just start writing it. A friend of mine, Michael Bryan, said that he had rewritten his resume, and Michael has, he's accomplished so much in his life. I think he is at Apple now. I think he's had a podcasting or something, by the way. But I got that advice from him, and I rewrote my resume, and that was a great exercise because it showed me the things that I wanted to put on it, like that I was proud of. And then, so that kind of started giving me an indication of like, okay, it's these things that I really liked. And I did go to therapy during that time, but it was really hard because I didn't have a therapist that understood the music business. So
most don't.
Yeah.
It's hard to find one.
Well,
because mine doesn't either.
Yeah, I just, I listened to all of these podcasts about entrepreneurs too, and like usually their idea or their business comes from a problem that they specifically had, and so that's what I didn't know at the time, but that's what was incubating there, because I needed to talk to somebody, and I needed that encouragement, or I even needed somebody to listen who understood. That would have helped a lot. And
so what you needed is what you became.
Exactly. So maybe that's what you're doing.
So your biggest weakness became your biggest strength, which is quite often, I think, what happens for a lot of us. Like something that was like a really hard thing turned into a really positive thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about I want to talk a little more about what all you do and offer and some of the group events that you do as well. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, it's funny. It all makes sense to me, but it might hopefully not sound confusing. But so I do live workshops, and they're online on Zoom. And I love that because I've had people from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, Ireland, like
worldwide.
Anybody can come and make connection and be a part of a group. And by the way, I take a lot of classes online. Like I've expanded my network of friends so much just from doing stuff that I like, So I would say if you're a songwriter and you want to learn more about it and you want to stick your toe in the water, this is a great way to do it. And I always do, most of the time I always do like a really inexpensive launch. So I'll do like 3 classes for like a minimal fee.
Yeah, I saw it. It looked so affordable.
Yeah.
I was astonished at how affordable it was.
And then that's just kind of like, I want to have something for everyone.
Yeah.
But then if you want to like really get into like the one-on-one work in a real like smaller group and more consecutive thing, I'll have
you're a little more hands-on.
Yeah. I'll have a 8-week workshop in the fall starting in October.
Okay.
And those are more expensive, but I also try to provide payment plans and things like that.
That's awesome.
So I've got the live workshop. Live is where you thrive.
Is that current? So you do those currently?
I do. The best thing to tell people to do is to go to my website, which is my name, LeAnnPhelan.com, LeAnnPhelan.com. So everything that I do is on there. Even if there's
This will be in the show notes, by the way. I'll put all the links in the show notes.
The things that are in there are the live workshops, the private sessions.
So you can get a one-on-one. Like I could get a one-on-one with you.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And there's also a page for speaking engagements, or like if a corporation wants a creative workshop, that page is on there. Then there's a page for my newsletter called Creative Hydration, which I'm
Tell me about that.
Yeah, well,
that's a great name.
I think it's a great name because that's what it is. That's what this whole thing is. You're not gonna, get every little piece of everything you need doing my workshop. You're going to need my workshop. You're going to need a publishing champion. You're going to need a great co-writer. You're going to need, all about encouragement. But creative hydration is just thinking of it like we're running a marathon and like we're just getting a little kiosk of water. We're stopping and getting the water and getting the next mile and getting, so you got to stay creatively hydrated, which equals to me encouragement, and just and realizing like what we were talking about with you, nobody that I know that's had an amazing career has just like been like that. Like there have been like,
yeah,
not even, Shane McAnally or whoever. Like we're human. We have, successes and failures all the time. And so that's just what this is going to be. So the more encouragement you can get, the more you can know that this is how the process goes. And the trust in that guidance, whatever your beliefs are, I definitely know what that voice sounds like for me. And yeah, I have days all the time where I'm like, oh my gosh, do I need to go get a job, or can I keep,
That's the entrepreneurial life, right?
It's been crazy. One of my coaches said, well, it sounds like it's a real roller coaster for you. And I was like, yeah, it is. And I was like, wait a second. I love roller coasters. Like I love them. I'll every time I get on one, I'll just be like, I want to go again, so it really helped me to frame it like that because, it is like scary and exciting and thrilling and uncertain and like, all of those things. But
so how long have you been doing that? Like when did you make the transition? Was it 2020? It
was in 2020. And I still, have managed clients through that. But right now, I'm really feeling the pull to just do this. I mean, the things that are calling me are, the 9-month life coaching course and the other ways to, just keep developing.
That's so awesome. 'Cause I'm such a believer of like, if I go into something without trying to get something in return, or I go because I want to help someone, like that's really what I've kind of changed over time is like my goal is to help. And it always ends up turning out great. when you have that attitude. And it's a selfless attitude, and I'm not being braggadocious, but I would say that if I could have encouraged anybody, it would be, you know, in Music City or any job or whatever, like having that attitude is such a winner all day long. And I think it's what's going to make your business so successful, because what you are doing is helping people. You're providing a way for, like, the younger me, and even the now me, I want to, you know, be part of that. Just like sitting down and talking to you, and like your energy and vibe is very authentic.
Thank you.
And so to be able to get on board before you fill up all your slots and are too famous to take on any more clients, it's a cool opportunity that you're doing that. So people need to go over to LeAnn Phelan, but you should I'm going to spell it LeAnnPhelan.com.
Nobody's ever spelled it correctly. When, you know, like when you're on the phone you have to give your name, never spell it correctly. You just did such a great job.
Oh, well, that's good. I did it slower than you did, because for anybody listening. So I really appreciate you being on this podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad we're friends now.
Yeah, me too. And my buddy Cameron Steinist, I don't know, how do you know him?
Okay, well, I was going to say that, and I didn't want to interrupt what I felt like was the ending, but speaking of helping people, like, he teaches a class in Utah, and I was reaching out to him because I want to do something for his class, and we met, and he was lovely. And, you know, I didn't know why I really met him, you know what I mean? I think it was through my friend Courtney, but we had a great conversation, and then a couple days later, he helps me by saying, hey, my friend has a podcast and there's a slot. You should reach out to him. It's just all this big circle of helping and kindness.
It is. It's so cool. That's amazing.
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy. I can't speak highly enough. Yeah. Really genuine, kind, authentic human being. And it's funny because I'm with ASCAP.
Awesome.
Yeah. And there's that connection. And the reason, well, at the time I signed up with ASCAP was because me and Cameron had a song that was a sync song for a CMT show. And so the call was like super last minute, and they were like, are you registered with the PRO? I was like, no. And so I signed up with ASCAP. And and I just kind of pulled the trigger on that one because it felt right. And so I think I made $500 on that. And it was
sounds
cool.
About right.
Yeah. but it was like just funny because me and Cameron had that, little cut together probably 10 years ago, at least.
My goodness.
Yeah, so that's funny. But I'm glad that he connected us. And
me too.
Hopefully that this will help get the word out too about the awesome work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It makes me feel good and validated that you get it, so thank you.
Yeah.